Good afternoon. This is Bruce Montgomery, and thank you for joining me on this edition of Technology Access Television. Well, some of my best friends are nuclear engineers. Well, I'm not kidding. Yeah, I really have a lot of friends that know a lot about electricity and those types of things. In fact, one of my legendary mentors is one of the first people to get, African Americans, to get a advanced degree in nuclear technology, none other than Dr. Shirley Ann Jackson. Graduated from MIT and later is now the president of RPI University in upstate New York. And I know a lot of other people that have spent their career inside of the utility industry. And you know, Edison once said that if he came back to see what was going on in utilities, and he probably, you know, if he were to come back in today's time, he would say, I still kind of recognize some of the groundwork that I laid out, and it kind of looks the same. Well, I don't think that statement could be made anymore, because one of the industries that is literally changing dramatically right before our eyes is the producing of electrical energy and power. And of course, what would we do in our lives today that isn't some kind of way connected to being electrified? You know, when you get somewhere and your cell phone is about to run out of power and you're searching around for where am I going to plug it in? Yeah, that's right. Beyond the battery, you still need to have some juice. And so right here in Chicago, I have the good fortune to be involved with one of the most exciting changes that's taking place and impacting all of technology, and that's the changes going on in the electrical utility industry. And of course, our hometown hero, ComEd, is right in the middle of this drastic and dramatic opportunity of changes that are going on. New kinds of technologies are seeping into that stable old grid. And it's so exciting and so dynamic that I said, you know, I've got to bring some folks on who are deep in the weeds on this stuff and share some of what's going on so that we could have an understanding about how this not only benefits us, but what role can we play in this changing landscape. You know, some of us allowed some other trends to kind of pass us by, and we didn't get a lot out of it. Next thing we knew, it was the cloud, and it was mobile, and it was internet, and it was broadband. Well, you got a chance right now to be involved with the changes that's taking place in this industry. And my two guests today can probably shed more light on this than you could ever imagine. And we're going to have maybe one or two segments discussing these changes. My guest today is one of my good friends at this organization, ComEd, and that's Melissa Washington. Melissa, thank you for being here.
Bruce, thank you for having me.
I'm so delighted that you could come on and share your insights as an industry veteran. And you brought a friend with you, Mr. Russell DeSalvo.
Thanks, Bruce. Glad to be here.
I don't get to tie down engineers too long, so I don't know if I'm going to let you go. But we're going to have a good conversation today about what's going on in this industry. You know, and a lot of us have preconceived notions about our favorite person we love to throw darts at, and that's our power company. But you know, this is an organization that many of us could not imagine how much they are thinking about not only today, but the future, and they're actually preparing us for this future of an advancedly changed environment that includes so many technologies. So Melissa, describe, you know, we're gonna try to work our way down from the mountaintop, but in your role, you deal with a lot of these changes that are coming in place. Could you describe, first of all, your role at Commonwealth Edison and what you do on a daily basis in interacting with customers and changes in this energy landscape?
Certainly, Bruce. So I am Vice President of External Affairs and Large Customer Services. And in that role, I lead a group of people who engage with the community. They engage with our policymakers on a day-to-day basis for all of the municipalities that we serve in our territory. And ComEd has over 400 municipalities in our territory. And then I also have the group of individuals that serve as account managers on the day-to-day basis, working with our largest and very critical customers, also within our territory, over 5,000 customers. And these can range from the large hospitals that we have in our territory, corporations, manufacturing, which is very critical to our economy here, as well as the tall buildings that you see along the downtown corridor.
And one of the key beneficiaries of driving the Illinois economy has been the fact that ComEd is noted for having low cost and stable power for many, many years. And this has been an attractor to activities here in Illinois.
That's exactly right. We work with the state chambers who are also looking for ways to make sure we're attracting business here. And when you think about the things that we consider very important, providing reliable, low cost, and doing it safely, you know, in terms of our business values and the things that we really preach daily in our business. And when you think about the attraction of a community, electricity probably won't be the number one thing that will bring someone there, but it can definitely be a differentiator when they're making a decision about where they want to go. And when you look at the reliability that we've been able to provide over the last several years, breaking records every year in our reliability metrics, that definitely goes on the sheet as one of the attractive items to bring you here to Illinois.
Well, I think you and I share a common background in that you spent some of your corporate time in the telecom side of things, as did I. I come out of an IT and telecom background myself, and yet, you know, there's this intersection between power and communications and telecommunications, and Chicago is at that very interesting crossroads because Chicago's attributes have always been where we are. And so the roads come through here, the rails come through here, the fiber comes through here, and as a result, Chicago has some of the most important data centers on the planet, but you can't have a good data center if you can't have reliable power. And I imagine that's been a growing piece of the infrastructure that you support is supporting data centers and the growth in that arena.
That's exactly right. We have seen Chicago really, really lead in this area, and it has been a result of the reliability. And you are exactly right. Reliability is really, really top of mind for the data centers because they can't afford even a second of an outage or a blip in their systems, and they put the redundancy in that they need. But it also matters, you know, where they're doing it at. You'd asked me earlier about, you know, kind of my role in the intersection with the consumer, and I was listening to you talk about the change, you know, that's happened in our industry. I've been in this industry about 15 years, and I will say that there has been a significant evolution. We've talked about this change that we're now experiencing coming. I remember at one point I was in regulatory and we used to, you know, hear discussions about distributed generation and how things are going to be less centralized, and you know, no one really could visualize that, right? It's like, no, you're going to always need the electric grid in its current form. But as you can see over the last several years, we're making some strides. Now, it's probably not the strides that you see in the telecom business when it comes to cell phones, right? There's a new iteration of a cell phone, it feels like every 6 weeks. But when you think about the large infrastructure that's required to have an electric grid, there are significant, you know, advances that have been happening. And it's all driven by one thing, and it's changing customer expectations. Customers
Absolutely.
want it fast, they want it now, and they just have a need for data, and that's what's driving it.
Well, Russell, you've been on the real technical side of this business. You've been actually in the architecture of all that we don't see, from you know, those towers and those power lines and all the stuff that makes these electrons move. But you've seen. Tell us about how long you've been in the gauge with ComEd and your particular role at this time.
Right. So I've been in the industry about 20 years, and I've been at ComEd about 13 of those 20 years. I've seen a tremendous amount of change. We've seen change in the transmission system. We've seen change in how we generate power at a higher level. But we've seen recently the change that we've seen is been unprecedented. How the system was designed and what you call your grandparents' power system is totally going to have to change. We know that, and it's been changing. It's changed significantly over the years. What customers want and customers' desires are kind of driving a lot of that change. So that's something that in my career I've seen that come to the forefront, and definitely in the last few years I've been in grid modernization now, only a little bit less than a year, and it's been quite a ride. I've been in planning roles, I've been in engineering roles throughout the company, and this role has definitely seen a lot of change in my career. So,
well, when disruption comes, it disrupts, and it comes from both bottom up and top down. Again, when the data centers first came on the scene, it was driven by what some people thought was corporate requirements and institutional requirements, but really what's driven some of the most rapid scalability has been the unbelievable consumption that consumers have brought onto demands. And so when you're walking around with a smartphone, you're not just walking around with a smartphone, you're walking around with something that's connected to the cloud and other infrastructure. And when you're streaming some Netflix, that Netflix video is coming from some hosting farm, data center somewhere, and even though you're riding the green line and sitting there watching Orange is the New Black, it's only passing through all of this infrastructure. So it's got to be very exciting from all of the different technologies. And as, again, a person from an IT and telecom background, to me it looks like a lot of what happened in telecommunications and the internet and IP technology is just playing itself out in the electric grid. And so the grid is getting smarter because the grid is becoming two-way communications. You're embedding smart communication skills. When you talk about smart meters, well, what are smart meters if it's not an element of looking at a data requirement and then communicating that data? And now I think for the first time, customers are getting more of that data that they're paying attention to.
That's exactly right. When you talk about, the grid being smarter, that was not accidental. That was a deliberate advancement that we went to the General Assembly to ask support for back in 2011. And they had the foresight to say they want to make sure that Illinois remains competitive and that we do have reliable service, and the Electric Industry Modernization Act enabled us to do that. So we've made the grid smarter. We've implemented smart meters that will now allow customers to have access to data to help them make better decisions about how they use their electricity. And then it also allowed us to put distributed, what we call DA devices into the system, and it allows us to move away from the old way of repairing an outage to the new way. In the old way, if we had a circuit that was out, we had to wait until every piece of that circuit was repaired before we reconnected a whole line of customers. That could be thousands on one circuit. Now we can isolate and we can look for other opportunities to kind of cut that circuit off, so that if the problem is over here to the right, everybody to the left of that can get restored immediately, and then they can continue working on the others. So it just allows the system to really be smarter, and then also the smart meters put into place. A lot of times when we're doing storm restorations, we're not always sure in the old way, when people are back online, have we repaired everyone? But now we have the ability to remotely ping a meter to determine if it's working and if they do have power to the line. So it's really, helping the system kind of what I call self-heal in a way, faster, but then it also provides a lot of data to help us operate more efficiently, and that saves money and time.
Well, hearing you talk, it's such a almost beyond comprehension complex environment, because you're regulated. You have multiple layers of regulation that oversee what you do. You just can't move maybe as quickly. So unlike in some parts of the private sector, Netflix or Google, they can just kind of sneak stuff out and do some things, but everything you do comes under scrutiny of a variety of public bodies that make sure that what you're doing is in the best interest of all of the constituents that you serve. So you have a very kind of service-first model about what you do, but at the same time, it's also a complex ecosystem. So you don't make all of the components that go into this. Somebody makes a meter, somebody makes a switch, somebody makes all these other kinds of components. So you assemble a huge ecosystem. One of the things that I'd like to ask you is, a lot of people don't recognize how important the Chicago area is to that electrical ecosystem. That there are many, many companies that have made this technology what it is, from even the invention of nuclear, if you will, at University of Chicago and Argonne Laboratory, through all of the partners that are part of this. It's been a rich part of Chicago's business history, is the building out of what we know is this electrical grid. And how is this continuing?
Yeah, we've seen a lot of businesses here in Chicago participating, and a lot of local participation. Some of the first fuse that was used on the electrical system across the whole country was actually developed by Comet engineers. They left the company and started their own company, of course. Wanted to make a little bit more money, but we've seen a lot of these technologies, and we're trying to pull as much in locally as we can. There's local companies, like Melissa was saying before. Data centers are here. It's one of the fastest growing areas for data centers. But we're working with the community, working with the vendors, and trying to pull as much of that into this community as we can. because we understand that the more is here, the more we can interact with that, and that ecosystem you were talking about, it really helps everyone. It raises everyone up.
Now, there's, of course, a scramble for talent across all industries, but when you come to technology and STEM and engineering, while we've had these legacy engineering schools, it used to be that when people were coming out into the marketplace, that some of the first places they were looking, and the only places they were looking, if you had an electrical engineering degree and you went to the U of I, then naturally one of the first places on your list possibly was ComEd. But today, you're competing against all kinds of people for that talent. So does ComEd still have an important and ongoing relationship with the cultivation of talent in these technical areas so that you can, in fact, continue to lead as you've been leading for these many years that you've been involved?
Yeah, absolutely. It's incredibly important. Like you said, we're competing with the West Coast. We're competing with all these other industries that have been blooming for top technical talent. And I did go to the University of Illinois in Champaign. And
surprise,
right? And I'm happy to be here in Chicago. We've been trying to work with the community, so we're working on STEM programs. So how can we get kids interested from a young age to high school age, get them interested in STEM. We're also working with universities, local universities especially, trying to bring those students in. We have a robust internship program and rotation programs, and we're trying to develop that talent and show them that, hey, the utility industry is still a really interesting and exciting place to work, that we're really growing the technology and we're driving the future. Energy is a field that is, like you said, changing, it's expanding. And I think a lot of people are starting to realize that the utility is a great place to be.
And if I can add
please do.
What Russ is saying in terms of trying to be competitive by recruiting in those students, and we have found that there's some success to getting them early.
Okay.
And it's not just bringing in students. We want to make sure that the pool of candidates we're bringing in is matching our value of diversity as well. So what we try to do is make sure that we go and we find young African American students, young women, who are underrepresented as well. Latino students are underrepresented in STEM careers. So we try to target them through a series of things. I believe you're familiar with our Solar Spotlight program that we run for African American students in February during History Month, Black History Month, and we do it also during Hispanic Heritage Month for young Latino students. And it's really an awareness, an introduction, because a lot of times students aren't really aware of the opportunities. And if they hear about it, they may feel like, okay, I don't know an engineer that I can relate to. So we try to introduce them to people who are just like them, that can introduce that to them.
Absolutely. When I was introduced to your lead engineer, Michelle Blaze, and so impressed with her story, coming from IT and ascending the ranks in the organization. And I have to say, I'm somewhat envious because I'm a little frustrated right now. As a person who spent most of his adult life in IT and telecom, I'm appalled at the lack of diversity that some of these firms represent. When we look at the current standard bearers, the Googles, the Microsofts, they don't have the same level. But I look at you guys and I see, there was a Frank Clark, there was a CEO. I see Ann Pamajori, who was the CEO. I see you in a decision-making role. And I have to absolutely compliment your organization. So, people want to cast aspersions at the sleepy old utility, but the sleepy old utility isn't sleep at all, and as yet is creating these opportunities. And also, these opportunities are right in our own backyard. Right. So the innovation must happen here right in our own backyard. The microgrid, the smart grid, the new technologies you're rolling out, these smart meters, they're going to be on my house. They're going to be in my neighborhood, and somebody locally is going to have to install that. So these are jobs and economic impact right in our own backyard, and so it's very important that we inform our young people and people pursuing different roles. And I think you made the comment that it's not just about engineers, it's about skill sets up and down the ranks.
Absolutely.
There's data analytics that are required in the new environment of utilities. But Melissa, I want to ask you, since you have a role of dealing with customers, what are customers really requesting when they want to know about how you are changing to meet their needs? What are some of the top concerns that come up and you address when you're letting them know how your new suite of services is going to be good for their business?
Well, we try to make sure that we do get the pulse of the customer in several ways. We do surveys, with our residential customers. J.D. Power surveys gives us data points of how well we're doing and how responsive we are being to their needs. We also do a survey twice a year of our large commercial customers, and through that information, and then there's also surveys of our municipalities, but through that information, what we're able to really see is that there's a growing desire of awareness, right? Customers no longer think of the utility as that thing that you just plug in, and as long as you turn your lights on and you plug in your accessory and it works, that's all you want to know. Now there's a desire to have a better education, and because of that, what we try to do is make sure we communicate quite a bit with our customers, and we allow them to communicate with us in the way that they want to communicate with us. So social media is something that's in our suite of communications. They can tweet out when they have an outage, right?
Okay. All right.
And then
so you're leveraging a variety of technologies that your clients have adopted and creating a higher level of customer service that you're able to deliver through that process.
Information sharing and then also information gathering. And that's so critical to inform the technologies and the solutions that Russ and other engineers are trying to solve. And it really helps in the ideation process.
And as customers are thinking about options in solar and renewable and battery storage, are you finding them coming with questions of, what are my options here and how does this play out, and does this give me some competitive advantage, and are you able to add value to their fundamental strategies? Because you can say, well, I know a little bit about this stuff. Let me tell you what you can do that would give you this unique advantage you're looking for.
Yeah, I mean, it's, like you said, it's an interactive relationship with our customers. You made the comparison to telecom and how interactive that is now as compared to how it was before. That's how the utility industry and how the energy industry is really becoming. It's very interactive. We are constantly getting questions. You asked about questions and we laughed a little bit because the questions that we get are constant, and they're always really interesting ones, and a lot of them things that we haven't even thought of. So that the customers are constantly challenging us, constantly bringing us new problems and new interesting things, solar, storage, control technology, data acquisition. We talked about data. The data that we're going to have to manage and understand and make sense of is going to be immense compared to what it was in the past.
So customers are, and other people that are creating new business opportunities want to leverage that data. And so now open data opportunities in that arena, and smart meters. I in the last couple of years got one of these Nest thermostats, and I'm delighted when I can pull out my phone and see somebody in the house is getting a little too cute with the thermostat and say, wait a minute, come on, it's not that cold, it's not that hot. Let me dial this back a little bit, and that's just amazing that the technologies are integrating and coming together, and so. It's really important that Chicago really perceives how big an opportunity this is, that this could be a huge driver of not only what's in it for utility, but what's in it for the broader community if people come to the innovation table and begin contributing ideas. Melissa, do you see in the customers that you serve that kind of light bulb moment coming on for some of your customers that they say, not only am I a customer, but I could be a collaborator, I could be a partner, I could be a strategic ally in what this new landscape of energy is going to look like right here in Chicago and maybe around the country?
I would say yes, and it depends on where the customers are in their engagement spectrum. So we have customers that we bring in for forums to kind of help us come up with ideas to solutions. So we'll have maybe some of the questions that we talk about coming our way, and we try to solve for them, and then we bring focus groups in to say, did we get this right? Is this something that you want to be responsive to? One of the biggest, I would say, ideas that we had that have had lots of success is when we came up with the idea of giving reports so that you know how well you're conserving or not conserving energy compared to your neighbors. So what we've learned is that people have competitive juices, right? So, so when you get your report and you're like, okay, this is how you really play out compared to your neighbors. Are you average? Are you less than? Or are you above? And then trust me, we hear chatter when customers find that they're above, and they're like, "Well, why?
How's he beating me?"
Exactly.
Yeah,
what are
right.
they doing?" And then it makes you start to think.
All
So,
right.
so that came from really customer engagement. So when you talk about the light bulb going off, customers are feeding us information that's delivering things to them that they can relate to, use, and I think that light bulb's going to go off even more and even greater because customers are getting more sophisticated as we feed them more information and we start to react to it. And we're no longer that behind the scenes company. We're very transparent in everything that we do, and we try to engage them very early on, which, you know, the Bronzeville Community Future is really about that, and I know we'll be talking about that more.
Well, I'm sitting here today just having the time of my life talking to two very important people that are at the forefront of this change in what we know is the provisioning of electricity. And it's just not going to be the same anymore. And just like we've seen, you know, when I first started this show talking about PCs and wireless and Wi-Fi and the internet and all that kind of stuff, and it seemed like some arcane kind of conversation. I'm telling you right now, that you need to look at energy a different way. You need to look at your utility. You know, you probably need to look at your bill. You probably haven't really got inside of it and looked at some of these charts and graphs that Melissa's talking about. But my guest today, Melissa Washington, and also Mr. DeSalvo, is just really bringing some enlightenment to this. But guess what? We're going to continue this conversation and get a little more into the weeds on how all of us could play a part in what this technology is going to look like moving forward. Hey, my name is Bruce Montgomery. I've been talking to some friends of mine from ComEd. This is Technology Access Television, and guess what? We're just getting started with this conversation around energy and opportunities and the grid moving forward. We'll see you next time.